You are listening to Latinx America, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade. Thank you for joining us. Today's guest is Josh Torres. He is the Latinx Tech Program Manager at the Kapor Center for Social Impact, where he focuses on shaping and administering a national Latinx tech initiative. Josh is a passionate operational and strategic planner with a penchant for streamlined and efficient team communication and collaboration. His collective experience spans over 8 years, consulting for clients, working in-house for hyper-growth early-stage startups like Square, Yelp Reservations, and Asana. Josh is passionate about social justice and making the world a more connected and inclusive community for all. He is an Oakland resident who nerds out on science fiction, podcasts, Kickstarter, and comic books. Josh, thank you so much for joining us at Latinx America. It's great to have you. I have been following everything that the Kapor Center has been doing, and I'm really excited about your upcoming event. So I want to start our conversation by learning a little bit about your journey, both professionally and personal, into tech.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me on, Adriana. My journey professionally into tech was by accident. People always want a better answer than that, but I kind of fell into tech. I was working at a job in corporate sustainability and was seeking something a little bit more challenging. And being in the Bay Area, I was just like very curious and having a lot of conversations, exploring what was next in my life back in 2010, and got the opportunity to interview with a then small startup called Square. And that kind of just being on that, rocket ship, because I was there when it was 60 people and left when it was almost 300, kind of set me up for success in the tech world. I really got a lot of exposure to, wearing all the hats and doing all the work on an early team. But really, it was my curiosity and ambition. And I was able to kind of take whatever was asked of me and do some really good work. So that led me to kind of exploring more of what tech had to offer and really seeing the value that I could bring to different teams.
And this was at Square back in 2010. And how long were you with? I mean, that's a company, a startup we all know about.
Yeah, yeah. It was back in 2010. I was with Square very early on, and I transitioned away from Square about a year and a half after I joined for an opportunity to be on a team of 15. So very, very much a startup in that sense. And that was building restaurant reservation software. That was the only competitor at the time for OpenTable. And eventually that company got acquired by Yelp. It's now Yelp Reservations. So that was a whole nother kind of learning and interesting journey in terms of a different path that a company could take. And yeah, I saw myself at another inflection point at that point. And that led me to joining Asana, which is where I was for 4 years. So 3 kind of players in the market, all different kind of experiences, mostly enterprise B2B.
So you were working on B2B. You weren't coding or doing anything on the technical side, or were you delving into both tech and biz dev?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I started on the Square support team and then expanded my role to client services, customer success, and kind of was doing all of operations when I was on the SeatMe team that became Yelp Reservations. And at Asana, the entry point was client services, and I on the job learned a little bit of front end and learned a little bit more of the technical side that was required for client services. And then eventually I transitioned onto the marketing team and got a little bit more into the data side of things as well. So yeah, I always say like I dabble. I wouldn't call myself like a coder, but I understand and speak the language, and I can build very basic prototypes.
And that's very important. So, well, let's talk a little bit about diversity in tech. And you work for an organization that is trying to make inroads and do something about the leaky pipeline. What is the state of diversity gender, ethnicity, accessibility, different types of diversity. And obviously with a special focus on Latinx, because this is Latinx America. But what can you tell us about the state of diversity in tech?
Yes, totally. So I always kind of level set with people when I'm talking about this issue, because I think that when we think about diversity and inclusion and think about it in the world of tech, it's very new, right? Like these roles and this focus, it was born maybe 5 to 6 years ago, and it was born out of gender equity, right? Like a bunch of women kind of saw themselves working in tech, and they were like, there aren't any other women, and predominantly white women who had some power. And then what you saw was a cascading effect. So you saw then there being a focus on LGBTQ in the community, a focus on the Black community. And what I think there still is an opportunity for there to be is more of a focus on the Latinx community. And that's really where my programming is trying to fill the gap, and what we're trying to do in terms of creating a space where Latinx can come together and gain resources and convene and really kind of be a focus when we talk about diversity and inclusion, because I think they're missing from the conversation, or have been traditionally missing from the conversation.
So we're not quite there. Have we been making a little bit of inroads? So, I mean, I've been here for 20 years, so I know exactly what you mean with like back, in 2000, 2001, we weren't really talking about diversity at all. It was more build a product, build this, build that. And how do you think our community is doing in terms of actually joining in roles such as the role that you had, or other roles within tech companies?
I think we're doing a lot better. The demographic data isn't the best, but it's not the best for any community. But I have a lot of conversations and I see the representation. So we're there, we're working at the companies, we're at the Googles and the Facebooks, and also at small startups, and we're making inroads. And I think the next piece of that is really connecting everyone together so that we can, grab someone and bring them up with us, reach back and kind of make sure that we are creating more opportunities for more Latinx to just gain access.
And I think the building community is crucial, and that's not something that you saw even like 6 years ago. My gauge for diversity has been the Christmas party. My husband works at LinkedIn, and I get to see, he's been there for a while, so we've seen it grow, and we have seen a little bit of progress, but obviously more needs to be done in this area. So let's talk about what the Kapor Center does. What is the Kapor Center, and how are you driving efforts to increase diversity in tech?
Definitely, yeah. So I'm lucky and privileged enough to work at the Kapor Center, and our organization really sits at the intersection between social impact and diversity and inclusion in tech. And we really work to create a level playing field and try to build more access and opportunity for all underrepresented minorities. And we do that with a focus on 5 different areas. And the first being research. And we really try to, fund research into these issues and make sure that data is informing not only our programs, but broadly how tech companies are thinking about building up these programs. So we have a research arm. We have a nonprofit which focuses on the educational piece. So that nonprofit is called SMASH, and SMASH is really focused on building a pipeline for STEM education for high school students from these communities. And then we have our community engagement efforts, and that's the team that I sit on. So we are really focused on the parts of the leaky tech pipeline that are the tech workforce and entrepreneurship. So we want to make sure that these underrepresented groups are supported while they're working in tech, and if they're on paths to become entrepreneurs. And then we actually have a D&I focus, and we look at D&I internally. We're an extremely diverse organization, but we want to make sure we're also being inclusive and recognizing our own blind spots. And then ideally creating a model or models that other organizations externally can learn from as well. And then finally, we have an actual venture capital arm, and we hope to fund underrepresented groups, so more minority organizations and women-led ventures, and we want to actually give them more access to capital.
And you're all housed in Oakland, California.
Yep, we're all in Oakland on 21st and Broadway, right in Uptown.
But if somebody wanted to access some of the information um, or best practices that you've been able to share, they can just go to your website, right?
Yes, people can visit our website. We have a plethora of research, and we're always trying to report out the learnings from our different programmatic efforts and create models that we can kind of share more broadly.
Thank you, Josh. You mentioned that you're very focused on diversity and inclusion efforts. How can people listening become engaged in your efforts? Either support them, contribute to them, enhance them in some way?
Yeah, I mean, come to our events. We are really all about being in community and creating community. So we really just are open to kind of having people at all of our events and want to make sure that we are a convening place. We definitely don't want to be just ideating and figuring out what we think the community needs. We want to be in conversation with the community as much as possible. So come to our events. And then I would say, secondly, I see my work as really being a repository of resources. So we just want to be able to point people on the right path to get the support that they need, because we are one player in this ecosystem when it comes to diversity in tech. And we want to make sure that we're never recreating the wheel. We really want to just enhance the efforts of the amazing organizations that are also doing the work in this space.
Josh, if someone wants to go to your events, is there a way for them to subscribe to so they can receive notices from you, or should they just follow you on social media? I follow you and Lily on social media, and I always know when things are happening because you're very active social media users. But do you recommend the best way for people to know about your upcoming events? Because some of them sell out.
That's true. We definitely do have some capacity limits. And yeah, you're right. I'll give a plug. You follow me on Twitter. It's at Torjo87. Up my social media numbers a little bit. But we also have the traditional channels. So if you go on our website, actually, if you just go to kaporcenter.org/events, you can always see our up-to-date calendar of events. And those are events not only that we're throwing, but again, community-centered events that our partner organizations are throwing that we just want to give a platform to. And we also have a newsletter. So subscribing to our newsletter is a great way to kind of just be in the know, not only in terms of events, but in terms of different quality content that we're either creating or that we want to also give a platform to. So yeah, lots of ways to get plugged in.
Yeah, and I really like the research that you have because it provides just a baseline of where we were and where we're going. And speaking of where we're going, what are the biggest opportunities that you see for our community, and how do you think they can be best prepared to seize them?
For sure. I think the biggest opportunity for the Latinx community specifically is just to get into tech. We have a 97% opportunity. We're the second largest ethnic minority, and there's real power in those numbers. I think it's 52 million. And if we can kind of utilize tech and become innovators in this space, we'll change the quality of our lives forever. We'll create generational wealth. We'll also just change the quality of life for everyone. And I think we have a unique addition to these conversations because we are so community focused, and we bring being Latino, being Latina to the table in our full force of selves. And I think that is something that's really missing. And you hear these narratives around a lack of empathy in tech, and the Latinx community is one of the most empathetic communities. So we can really bridge that gap, and it will be beneficial not only to us, but to the rest of the world.
So those that want to join tech and want to find a way there, are there places, organizations where people wanting to join this tech world can get the training that they need that you have seen as useful and know of people that have gone through those programs and are now doing great things in tech?
Yeah, absolutely. There is, as I mentioned earlier, an entire ecosystem of resources. And I think, I would definitely point people not just to our website, but the Tech Hire Oakland website. I think it's techhireoakland.com. There are ways that we will plug you into pathways and support you on that journey. And there are amazing community partners and organizations that are doing this work on the ground to train people, because I think the skills are required to really enter this workforce. They're different and they're very nuanced and they're very specific. And there are a ton of boot camps that are really teaching people from non-traditional backgrounds the exact skills that they need to be successful. And a lot of organizations here locally in the Bay Area are pairing those skills, those more technical skills, with those holistic approach around the empathy and the softer skills, the EQ that is really required to be successful not only at the day-to-day of the job, but also just existing in this tech sphere, which is a very different working environment. So yeah, Tech Hire Oakland as a resource for sure. Career Karma is another great tool. They've just launched, it's Ruben Harris's company. It's specific to software engineering, but it's supporting people throughout their journey in tech. So I think what I love about them is they support you even after you get a job. So it's job placement and then continued support once you have that job to ensure you're successful long term.
This is not just joining, it's also retaining. I used to work in college admissions at the beginning of my career. And we not only focus on recruiting the students, but making sure that they were going to have a great experience there and stay there for 4 years. With tech, it's a little bit different because you want them to stay there longer than 4 years. But creating that climate and having those resources to be able to make it through, even when you're going through challenging times, right? Speaking of challenging times and resources, how important is networking and mentoring in your opinion?
Yeah, my entire job is networking and mentoring. So I see it as paramount to achieving success in anything that you want to do, tech related or not. I think people are generally willing to help and are open to having a conversation with you if you are willing to ask. And I think a lot of people kind of have that fear of even just approaching people if they have a certain title or a certain experience. And, I'll say I am always open to people approaching me, and I'm here to help, anyone who is seeking guidance on their path. And I am so grateful to the mentors in my life who have kind of helped to guide me at different inflection points, because I think just talking through things with someone is super helpful. And again, just building that community that happens through these conversations. So I think I have mentors who are now peers and who are now friends, and I find that really valuable.
And one of the things that I often hear from some of the people that send notes in is, wow, I wish some of these resources were available in the East Coast or in some other part of the country. And in some cases, we do have international listeners, so some other parts of the world. Are there any resources that you recommend that people can access from anywhere?
I think, with tech being a way for people to connect, I think there's, again, this idea that people in Silicon Valley aren't accessible everywhere. And they definitely are. I have taken calls with people all over the country if they've reached out to me on LinkedIn. So don't let that be a barrier. But I think there's also this myth I want to dispel that, Silicon Valley definitely has a concentration of these resources, but I've, spent the last 3 weeks traveling to 10 different cities across the country as part of my programming. And there are ecosystems that may not be as built out, but people in each of these places, in a lot of these cities, who have experience and have just valuable insights. People who have been in Silicon Valley and moved, or who just have really interesting experiences building tech tools. So I think my hope is that we'll continue to see a dissemination away from this concentration being just in Silicon Valley, and more innovation happening in other parts of the country and ideally other parts of the world. Because again, tech is not location based, and that's the magic of it. So that's the hope I have.
Wow, Josh, you just came back from a 10-city tour. Can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced during the summits that you were hosting? And also, who were you meeting? And how are Latinos different in the East Coast and Puerto Rico? I know you've been everywhere. So tell us about your recent journey and how, that experience has kind of opened your eyes.
For sure. It was super exciting to kind of, again, be able to bring our knowledge and our experiences from the Bay Area to 10 different cities across the country. We were in New York, Boston, Miami, Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, Detroit, Philadelphia, Portland, LA, Oakland, and I think that's it. Did I miss someone? I think that's it. And it was amazing. I think we learned so much from each place. Puerto Rico was super inspiring. We were there on the 1-year anniversary of Maria, and we really just saw people coming together and wanting to innovate and create solutions that were immediately impactful to their communities. And that just resonated with us so much. And we were so happy to be able to kind of use the startup weekend as a vehicle for that, as a vehicle for them to convene in that way. And yeah, just to back up, this 10 city tour was, us bringing Techstars model. So we partnered with Techstars, which is an amazing organization that works, that has created the largest global network of entrepreneurs. So that's another tool that I would definitely point everyone to. There's startup weekends all over the world, all of the time. So go to their website, look up when the closest one nearest you is happening, and usually you'll be able to get plugged in right away. We wanted to launch, and we, for the past 3 years, have launched with Techstars a Latinx specific startup weekend. And this year we decided to bring it to 10 cities. So using that as a vehicle in each city just really showed us how different each place was, and how the East Coast is just full of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. And we really saw when we were in Tucson, being in a border town and having Mexicans actually cross the border to come to our event, the different nuances and what the communities in each place really needed, and were really galvanized to action to create. And again, that was the most inspiring part, is that everyone was really just creating the solutions that were relevant to their communities, and just connecting with one another, and seeing the value that they could bring to teams, and the value in their own ideas.
So I know that Puerto Rico is building a lot of things with blockchain. Did you see any pattern of certain, new trends that you'd like to share, that, or did they differ from city to city?
I think what we saw, so Tucson is just top of mind because I just was there. What I saw in Tucson was a lot of businesses or ideas being built around binationalism. So how do we kind of solve for problems that exist in both Mexico and in the US? And so that was very different from any other startup weekend that I attended. I think New York was interesting because you saw a lot of intersectionality. You saw representation from multiple communities. So the winning team there was actually an app focused on LGBTQA health. So using health tech there was a major priority. Health as a theme actually was a big one, healthcare, and tech. Almost in every city, it bubbled up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That in itself is diversity. You're seeing different things in different places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Techstars as an organization that we should follow. Are there other influencers, whether it's companies or people, that you follow, and why? Why should we follow them too?
Yeah, I'll give you guys some lesser known people that are friends in my circle, because I think I struggle with the term influencers, because I think we all have influence, and I think that we all can build, we can all bring value, and we all should be building community. So I'll throw out Aniya Williams, who is one of those amazing mentors / friends. She is the executive director of Black and Brown Founders and is doing amazing work to support Black and brown founders all over the country on their journeys to entrepreneurship. Great follow online. Jarvis Johnson is also a great friend of mine, and he is both an informative follow from, he's a Black software engineer in the space. He works at Patreon, but he's also really funny and is a creator. And I think he exemplifies that you can be more than your job. And I think we often forget that. And I really value that he is both a very successful software engineer at a growing startup in the Bay, and is also growing a following with just making like fun YouTube videos. And then I will say Joshua Encarnacion is a great follow for just getting insight and support. Even if he doesn't know you, this guy is rooting for you and is such a cheerleader for everyone from the Latinx community and people in general. So when you need a feel-good follow, I would definitely recommend him.
Thank you, Josh. And we'll include those names on the notes of this podcast so people will know,
Perfect.
who you're following. We spoke about empathy as being something important that our community brings to the table, but are there other skills that you suggest people should acquire if they want to join the tech industry?
Yeah, I think that everyone kind of hammers this, but I'm gonna get on this train as well. It's really the softer skills. It's your EQ, your emotional intelligence. So I'll reiterate that empathy is the number one for sure. And then I would say curiosity and humility. So no matter what technical skills you choose to focus on, you can go deep on all of those technical skills. But I think if you are grounded in empathy, curiosity, and humility in all that you do, you are guaranteed success.
Thanks, Josh. Do you see something in the future? What do you see in the future for those wanting to join the tech world? Are there certain fields that they should be specializing in?
Yeah, there's a ton of emerging tech trends, and there always will be. That's like the amazing part of being in an innovative space. So I guess I would say like blockchain is definitely interesting. You can create so much there, and I think it's a little bit of an untapped market. There's a lot of unknowns, which is exciting. And I think the other piece that I'm super excited about is AI, because I think we need to bake more diversity and diverse builders into AI. But AI is going to be a super powerful tool that's going to, it already touches everything that we do. You see it with like Google Maps suggesting places to you, and just like all of these small ways AI is kind of built into our lifestyles, and that's just going to continue to expand. So it's really going to connect us as a global community. So having more people developing what that looks like from a diverse perspective is really, really important. And then there's this creative piece to VR and AR. And I think, getting involved in that now, there's a ton of white space. There aren't many people creating for those mediums. So it's an early stage technology that I also think is going to fundamentally change the way we interact with each other and the world. And getting in there now is going to be a really good place to focus.
I'm actually really excited about VR, and I'm working on learning so I can create some content using VR. So
that's awesome.
Maybe we'll have you back when I'm already ready to launch with my VR side.
Well, it makes so much sense for media, right? Like I think social media kind of shifted the way we consume media in our day-to-day, and people constantly forget like social media didn't exist a decade ago, and 10 years ago there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram. So in that 10 years time, like look at how we've completely shifted how we interact. So I think it's amazing that you, as someone with this media background, are going to explore VR, because I'm excited to see what you do.
Well, I'll keep you posted. Let's go back to your personal life. Let's go back to your journey. Who influenced you the most, personally or professionally, and why?
This is probably going to be cliche, but I think I have to say my mom. Okay. She just sacrificed so much for me. And despite that sacrifice, was always on a path of continued learning. She has her PhD in forensic psychology. So I was always kind of focused on education as a pathway to success. So yeah, she shaped me in so many ways, both personally, obviously, as she raised me, and then professionally as a true example.
A PhD in forensic psychology. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What advice do you wish someone had given you before you made the different career moves that you mentioned, or even before you joined, the industry, that you would give to someone?
Yeah, I think the career advice I constantly give, and I have to remind myself of a lot of the times, is careers are nonlinear. I think for most of my life growing up, I thought I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get this major, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And that's kind of like the mindset I had around my career. And I said this earlier, but this formula has like bubbled up for me in so many ways, but it's really like my curiosity and my ambition have created so much opportunity in my life, and opportunities that I would have never predicted or even kind of been drawn to. So being open in that way has really allowed for incredible career success. So yeah, I guess just like continue to be curious and ambitious, and don't like hold on too tightly to a way you think your career should be.
Because as you mentioned too, like 10 years ago, we had no social media. And look how much social media has changed the careers with many people, whether it's, the founders of social media companies or just users and influencers that are making a living from social media. So, good advice. On the advice side too, are there habits, rituals, good advice that you follow, good habits that you follow that you recommend to others who are in this space?
Yeah, the biggest one is just self-care. I can't advocate for therapy enough. Therapy changed my life, and I believe that everyone should go to therapy. It's not talked about enough in our communities, and I think I wish it was, and I try to be that voice as much as I can be. Um, but yeah, overall, just taking time for yourself, learning your limits, and setting really good and strong boundaries. I think this work, just working at a tech company, it can be extremely demanding and push you in different ways and stretch you and make you uncomfortable, which is really, really good. But we all have limits, and it's up to you individually, all of us individually, to define those limits and kind of understand what is a safe space for you to grow, as opposed to really, breaking you. And, I think the industry talks a lot about burnout, and a lot of people face it and go through it, myself included. So rather than learning about that the hard way, take the advice from so many who have been there and really just set those boundaries.
Josh, I recently read an article that you posted on LinkedIn. You actually posted it on Medium also, about your journey and some of the challenges that you faced, personal challenges that you faced, and how you were able to get through them. Can you talk a little bit about, your article and some of the advice that you gave through written word there?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about the the article where I came out as depressed,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting because I think I have recently been writing a lot, or trying to write more, I should say, and that was the first piece that I kind of had put on Medium that was very personal and
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable, and that was a journey in and of itself. But I think it was important for me to articulate what I was going through and what was going on for me, because I think I, again, just like had found myself in a place of struggle, and I didn't know how to ask for help. And once I did, everything got so much better. And it put me on a path to be in therapy, which I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
which was, paramount to my healing. And to also recognize, that I wasn't setting good boundaries, that I had burned myself out in different roles throughout my career. And I call it like work trauma,
Mm-hmm.
because I think I had gotten to a place where I pushed myself to the limit and never really dealt with that. So I was like there's another term in the tech world, and it's called technical debt. So I think I had like a lot of like emotional debt that I needed to work through. So I got to a place where, I started to recognize a lot of the privilege that I had, and I think I just had the space to deal with a lot of what I had put aside for a long time. And I think, especially in our communities, all communities of color, but the Latinx communities, we face a lot. We are resilient to so much, but I think there is a lot of value in processing a lot of what we go through. And I'm learning that every day. And I'm learning, again, what is good for me. And, in terms of what works for me, it's really just like being consistent with exercise, with going to therapy, with, being honest with myself. I try to take time to meditate and to be slow moving is what I call it, because I think there's so much conversation around being fast and hustling, and I think yes, but I also seek out balance, so I can push hard and deliver on amazing programs. Go to 10 cities, and then balance that by like taking a vacation in November, which I'm doing. So just understanding how to navigate all of that has been really helpful for me, and again, just like being open and honest about so much of that.
And many of us learned from that honesty. I'm going to put a link to that article on the notes of the podcast. So if people want to read it, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the honesty because we don't talk about it. And often when I do these interviews and when we have guests, they're like, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and it needs to be done during this time, and this is how you're going to succeed. And yes, we want to succeed, but not at the expense of your well-being too. So you can pace yourself out and or find resources like those that you found in a support system that will help you through things. So thank you, Josh, for sharing. I know that sometimes to share a personal situation, it's hard. It's hard for anyone, but I really hope that those that are listening really take to heart some of the advice that you're sharing, both professional and also for their personal well-being. So why don't we move on to the last question, which is, tell me about the event that is happening next week in Oakland. And also, what is your next play?
So the event next week is the LTX Summit. It's a summit for Latinx in tech, the inaugural year, the first of its kind. We're convening 250 Latinx together to just talk about what it means to be Latinx, what it means to be part of this community, to kind of go deeply into the different levels of our intersectional identities, and how we show up for each other. And then we're going to pair that programming with more traditional skills-based learning. So day 2 will be completely focused on getting a job in tech, supporting mid-level employees on advancing their career in tech, and then also supporting entrepreneurs on their journey to create companies. So we're super excited. We just have been planning this for months, and we've gotten a lot of validation points. We have amazing speakers, really strong programming. So yeah, we're pumped to bring this to the community.
Great. And in terms of your next play, professionally or personally, what are you looking at?
Yeah, so I have been lucky enough to be what I call, and a lot of people I guess call, an entrepreneur. So I have an entrepreneurial spirit. So every startup I've worked at, I've pointed out and identified a problem and been able to create a position to solve that problem or build a team around that. And that's been really exciting because my funders have been my employers, including here at the Kapor Center. This Latinx in tech program manager, which is my title, was something I created a year ago because I really identified a problem and was able to pitch leadership on going after this problem and hiring me to do it. So I think taking that energy and seeing it in hindsight as what I've been doing throughout my entire career, I at some point do want to start a company. So not completely sure on when that will be, because I'm still very committed right now to building out this community and being a resource and being in service. But one day soon, I think the entrepreneur in me is gonna have its heyday.
Well, I can't wait to hear once you get started and to continue supporting your efforts as a partner. I am very happy that I'll be joining you at the Kapor Center's event next week, and I will be capturing stories of other Latinx in tech. So thank you for the opportunity to partner on this. And as I mentioned, I look forward to continuing to follow your journey. And thank you so much for your time, Josh.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Can't wait to see you next week.
I'm really looking forward to collaborating with Josh and the Kapor Center and capturing stories at the Latinx Summit. Now, let's move on to our tech term for the episode. And the definition comes from research done by the Kapor Center. And the term is leaky tech pipeline framework, which describes the barriers across the pipeline that produce disparities. This leaky tech pipeline framework provides a roadmap for comprehensive interventions and solutions to increase racial and gender diversity across the tech ecosystems, such as increasing equity in K-12 education, expanding computer science education, enhancing pathways into technology careers, implementing comprehensive diversity and inclusion strategies within companies, increasing the prevalence of diverse computing role models, and creating public and private partnerships to develop the future computing workforce. If you want to read the full report, you can go to the kaporcenter.org. This website has other reports as well as other resources which might be useful to you. Okay, don't forget to rate our podcast. And also, don't forget to follow Josh via Twitter. He did provide his handle. We have some of the links for some of the resources mentioned in the episode listed under the podcast notes. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Latinx America and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.